everyone, welcome back, or welcome if you're new. My name is Kira, and today we are going to be doing all of my ocean horror / thriller book recs. So I've had quite a few people actually ask me for my ocean horror thriller book rec. It's one of my favorite subgenres of horror and thriller. Just the idea of not knowing what's beneath you, what can be out there. It's just always super spooky and tons of fun, and I have quite a few of them. I've read a lot and I have even more on my list to read. So I'm going to do the ones that I really recommend and I've absolutely loved to read, and then also the ones towards the end that I'm still planning on reading. I didn't include some of them in my summer TBR because I wanted to put some of them here, and I think I'm going to do a reread of some of these books. Now that I've been looking at them, I'm just really excited to reread them. I think they're some of the scariest books that I've read, mostly just because I've always been a little bit afraid of the ocean. Not enough to not get in it, but I definitely wonder what's beneath me. I say ocean, but some of these have to do with lakes or rivers, so I guess you could just say water horror. So I'll just share them all. So I don't know, I can't really categorize them, so I'm just going to put them by author. And I'm going to start with one of my favorite horror authors actually, and that is Deborah Castaneda. I actually found her because of this book and The Root Witch. I've seen her on a lot of lists, and so I just started reading her Dark Earth Rising series. They're always a creature feature of some form, and also kind of different environmental changes. And I always really love the way that she does these stories. I think I read A Dark and Rising Tide first out of her books. There's not really an order because they don't really connect, except for a couple of them. But A Dark and Rising Tide is about a massive storm that happens to this town. They're all preparing for it. Most of the town evacuates, but some stay there. And there's massive flooding. And as the flooding comes in, something else comes in with it. I just wasn't expecting it to go the way it did, but it was really, really tense and fun. They had to get in the water. Whenever they're forced into the water, it's just super scary. She has creatures that are similar to something you've heard about sometimes, but also extremely different. I love the way she took it at the end. They're basically in houses that are suspended over the water for a short period of time, and they just have to make their way through it. And I really, really thought there were some great scary moments in this one. But this one also has another element because it's dangerous to go outside because the storm is still going on. There's still massive flooding. It would be dangerous if there wasn't an element of something trying to kill you in the same thing. So I really highly recommend her series. I like them. They can be a little bit gory, but nothing too crazy, and there's nothing ever that really takes me out of it that's too ridiculous. It's all extremely believable. I really loved this book. It's one of my favorite water horror books. My favorite novel of hers so far, though, is The Devil's Shallows. So this one is more water adjacent. So this is about a controversial housing development that has been pushed by the marsh. The area has this legend called the Sloth Devil. There's been a bunch of disappearances. It's like the local urban legend, but the developers obviously don't take it seriously, and the people that move there, a lot of the times they don't know about it, or they don't take it seriously either. But they're moving into the area. They all live in these cabins, and they're just moving in, so there's a lot of kinks that still need to be worked out, like communication. It follows two main characters really, and one of them is the survivalist, a naturalist. He runs tours. He's heard of it, maybe seen it, but he doesn't really know for sure. As these people settle in the first few days, a lot of things start going missing. There's scratches. They think they see something near the docks because they're on the marsh, and it goes crazy. I will say there's a couple of things that are a little bit dark in this one. Once it gets going, it is just I would not want to be in that community. There's a storm that rolls in that makes it even worse, and it's just a free-for-all. I loved the creature in this one. I thought they were so unique and believable. Just the marshlands, the creature, how they're attacked, it really gets going, and then it just doesn't let up. At the end, I got a little bit of emotional, which I don't normally do in books, especially in horror books, but it was just, I really loved this book. I thought it was great. And while it's not directly on the water, there are elements where they are in water, and the creature is heavily associated with the water, so I think it definitely applies. So the next book I have is something that I talked about recently, and that is Fathomless by Greg Beck. I have always loved Greg Beck's writing. He's more adventure thriller or adventure horror, and this one definitely fit the bill. I have been wanting to read Fathomless for a long time, and I finally read it last month, and it is a great ocean horror book. It is the first in the Kate Granger series, so this one is like a 3-for-1. There's 2 more in the series called Abyss and Leviathan, and I really want to get those ones. I finally broke down and just got this last month, so I think I'm going to try to get the other 2 soon. But this follows our main character, Kate Granger, who's an evolutionary biologist, and she finds an area that has been untouched, basically like a cave system that is submerged, and she gets an expedition going. She has a shark expert come because they had gotten some footage of something that was rather large there, but there's quite a lot going on. There's other things in the water that they have to contend with. He always has a human element of a bad guy, which I don't care about too much, but it does add another threat to our characters. And there's one moment in this one where I was reading it and I like sat up and closed the book because I don't get scared in horror books, but this one just like, oh my gosh, get out of the water sort of situation. And it was really great. And there was a couple of situations where it was like that, where the author like forces them into water with this and you don't want to be there. Sorry if you can hear a little one. There's one of my neighbors has their kids, so they're not having a good time. And I will say the first 60% of this book feels very different from the last portion of the book, but I did like it because it was sort of like getting 2 books in one. It is a bigger horror book, so you have a little bit more meat to your story. But I really liked this one. So I do plan on reading Abyss and Leviathan at some point, so if you want to stick around and see me review that, it'll be at some point during the summer, probably. So the next book that I have is almost neck and neck with my favorite ocean horror book, and that is From Below by Darcy Coates. If you're in the horror community, you know she's somewhat considered like cozy horror. She's more spooky and atmospheric than she is like gory or super disturbing. I would say some of her recent writing is not quite like that. I think she's getting a little bit more, she's exploring with a little bit more gory stuff. This one definitely ups the spook factor, and when it comes to ocean horror, I don't really know if you get much more ocean than this. This is about a research expedition that has located the SS Arcadia, which went missing years before with all of her crew and all of the passengers, with just some very disturbing last messages that they received. They have located the ship. It is beneath the ocean. So almost this entire book takes place underwater. Adds this level of claustrophobia, so if you don't like that, this book is probably not for you. But they are researching what happened, entering in the ship with all of their gear. And there is a bit of a dual timeline, which I really like, because you start seeing what happened to the previous crew, and that adds another element of like terror to it. But just because they have a very limited field of vision with their masks, it adds this other element, because it's not just dealing with what's in the ocean that you can't see, it's what's right beside your face that you can't see. They're underwater and it's so cold down there that things are really perfectly preserved, which adds something else entirely. I inhaled this book. I think this is one of the first like horror books that I read that really got me into the genre. It was so great. I really loved it, and I think a lot of people do as well. It just moved so well, and it was really hard to put it down. I really think people should read this one more if you love ocean horror. As for the next one, I really don't hear that much about, and I think more people should read. That is Blood Cruise by Matt Stransberg. So this is actually more like river horror, but it's still water. It still adds that element to it. It feels somewhat 30 Days of Night with water. If you read it, you'll see. It is a thicker book, but it follows a booze cruise. So people are traveling on a cruise between these 2 areas on a river, and it's really just a night trip, but everyone just kind of gets drunk the whole time. Something starts happening. There's some things on the ship that they have to deal with, and they can't get off because they're on the ship. So it just adds this element of isolation, and you can't escape. It's at night, so there's something else entirely to it. You know, the beginning was a little bit slow, but once it started, it really got going. And so I really enjoyed this one. It was surprising to me, but still just a whole lot of fun. You just didn't know who to trust in this one and what they were gonna do, and yeah, you didn't really want to put it down once the action started to get going. So the next one I have is Crimson Deep by Anthony M. Strong. This is one of the books in the John Decker series. It is more adventure thriller, and John Decker is a series, so I've been reading them in order and you get more from it that way. But if you really just want some sort of like water adjacent book, then this is the one for you. This is about a Florida wetland. Explorers, scuba divers go missing. Some researchers in another area see something like impossible when they're using their ROV to look at things, and it just gets crazy. A lot of people start going missing. This thing is so different, but similar enough to something that would exist in reality that it makes a little bit more sense than some of his other books do. Some of them are a little bit ridiculous, but I still have a lot of fun with them. The action in this was crazy. I will say his books are a tad bit gory sometimes. It's not like too extreme for me, but there's been some moments, particularly in this book, where there was some times when I was like, oh, that's a lot. I used to be able to deal with that a lot more than I can now, but I still really enjoyed it. It was still a great water horror. They ended up in water, which just adds this other element to it. I really enjoyed it. It is a shorter book, so if you want like a little short water adjacent book, then I recommend this one. So another shorter book that you can read is Merfolk by Jeremy Bates. I did like this one. This one is obviously about killer mermaids, but it's a little bit different. It's essentially a researcher that has found some evidence that there's creatures that he's been looking for in myth and legend, and he's somewhat pinpointed where it was, so he goes to explore the area. Very much the hunter becomes the hunted sort of situation. I thought they had some good moments. I think it took a little bit too long to get to where the creature was. I like it a little bit earlier in the book, but this is still a good horror book, creature feature, if you really want to read that. That's a little bit different from like sharks. And I still really enjoyed it, and I still like Jeremy Bates' books. He always does something a little bit different just to make it more unique to him, so I think it's still great. However, when it comes to killer mermaids, my favorite book and my favorite, I think, horror book at this point is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. So I didn't read this one for a little bit because in the back it just talks about killer mermaids, and I was like, well, you just gave it away, that's no fun. I finally picked it up and read it after I read From Below, and I was obsessed with it. It is about an expedition that is following the footsteps of the Atargatis that went missing 7 years before. The crew in that ship was trying to film a mockumentary about the mermaid legend, and so they were going to some areas where people had reported them in history, and the entire ship goes missing. And then eventually the ship turns up, but none of the people are there, and there's damage to the ship, and eventually some footage comes out that they had filmed there that hints that what they were looking for they found, and terrible things happen to the crew. So this follows the sister of basically the presenter that was on the original ship, and they're going with a bunch of experts out to investigate what happened, and what they find is terrifying. I loved this book. Even the quotes that begin the chapters really add to the spook factor. The found footage aspect of it, really, I love found footage. I think it's really great. I think it adds to another level of horror to everything. Just them being on the ship, and as they get more and more information, it just becomes scarier and scarier, and then when everything happens, it starts going crazy. I just loved this one. It was so creepy and scary at some points. I could not put it down, and I've just yet to find a book that really hits the way this one does, besides like Devolution by Max Brooks, but that is Killer Sasquatch. So I highly recommend this book. If you've not read it, if you think that it sounds silly, because I did at first, it's definitely not. It was really great. I really think everyone should read this if you like horror, ocean horror. So because I couldn't find a book like that, I actually found Rolling in the Deep, which is the prequel to that book. Some people say you should read the prequel first, but I really don't think so. I think that finding out what happened to the original expedition is scarier in this other book, just getting little nuggets as they find out, as they experience the threat as well. I just think it's better to read the Into the Drowning Deep and then go to read Rolling in the Deep. Rolling in the Deep is a little novella, and I actually had to get the Kindle version from the publisher's website, but it was still really enjoyable to read. I read it really quickly just because it's not big, but I think it was also scary because you knew from the first book what you were going into and things made a little bit more sense. I think you give away too much if you read Rolling in the Deep first. That's just my opinion. Maybe somebody else has a different opinion, but I still think it's a really great read. It's fun and it's a quick read, but still enjoyable. So I have read other ocean horror books, but these are the ones that I recommend. The other ones I didn't like as much, or I didn't really find too scary. But there are some books now that I do still plan on reading. So I'll talk about some of that I'm planning on reading as well. The first of which is The Deep by Nick Cutter. So I started it a little while ago. I had to put it down just because of like where I was at, and I was not really feeling any more horror for a little bit. But this one is always recommended in the ocean horror community. A strange plague that has decimated humanity called the Get, and there is an underwater research station that has been performing experiments and trying to find a solution, a cure for it, but they go dark. And so one of the head scientist's brother gets called in to help and to figure out what's happened. So they go down into the ocean, into this underwater facility, and things happen. So I started this book, and there's a little bit of animal horror right at the beginning. It seems like his brother is a bit of a crazy person, honestly, and so I had to put it down for a little bit. I've been told that I really should read it, so I think I am going to give it a shot. I don't read extreme horror. It's just not something that I like. I don't like anything too gory or disturbing. And this one is borderline. I've heard Nick Cutter is kind of like an intro to splatterpunk and extreme horror. So I'm going to give it a shot, but if you like a bit darker books, then I think that this book is going to be something you'll like. I will give it a shot at some point this summer, probably. I'm a little bit nervous about this one, actually. The next one I'm actually somewhat currently reading is Deep Fathom by James Rollins. If you've been here a bit, you know that I like James Rollins. He is another adventure thriller writer, and this is one of his standalone novels. I think it's an earlier novel, but it is about a series of natural disasters that have started to devastate the planet, mostly along the Ring of Fire, the Pacific Rim. Air Force One goes missing during these storms and disasters, and so they're hired a local ship called the Deep Fathom with a former like Navy SEAL at command, trying to discover what happened. There's these ancient ruins that have come out of the seabed during this emergency. So there's quite a lot going on, and I don't really know where it's going. I'm not that far in. I'm just a little bit of the ways in. I had to put it down just because I'd been reading too many thrillers and horror books, but I still really enjoy this. There's already been scenes where they're underwater, and so I don't know where this is going. I never really can expect where James Rollins is taking these books, but he always weaves everything together in the end. And so I think this is going to be a great ocean thriller. I wouldn't say it's horror. So the next book that I'm planning on reading, which I actually got through Kindle Unlimited, is Adrift by K.R. Griffiths. I had heard about this one in one of my books of horror posts, and it is about basically an agoraphobic who's dealing with a lot of anxiety. He gets onto a cruise ship as a celebration for him getting through so much, and they see a body get tossed overboard, but then there's a lot going on in the ship. I have a feeling it might be similar to Blood Cruise in a way, but I've heard a lot of people really like it. So I do plan on reading that at some point. I have it on Kindle Unlimited, so I want to get it read and sent back. So the next book I want to read at some point is The Chill by Scott Carson. I've had this book for a while, and it is a smaller book, but it is more of a lake horror. So not quite ocean, but it is about a town that was flooded and submerged as a dam was built years before. Fast forward in time, an inspector is going to investigate that dam that has been seriously mismanaged and also just neglected, and he sees something that he can't explain. There's something else going on. They believe that people didn't evacuate the town before it was submerged willingly or at all, possibly, and there's quite a lot going on. The waters are beginning to rise and some dark things begin to happen. I've heard people describe this as similar to The Fog, so I loved that. That was such an eerie movie story, and I am very excited to see where this goes. So the last one that I have on my radar for this year is something a little bit ridiculous, but it always shows up in the lists. And they always say it's a fun time and you should read it. There's a lot of great moments to it. And that is Something is Alive on the Titanic by Robert J. Sterling. The Titanic is always something that kind of captures people's attention. That element to the story is very interesting to me, but it is following an expedition that's following in previous expeditions' footsteps. There are some whispers that are some creature or ghosts that are haunting the Titanic, so I think they're down in submarines in this one, and that always adds claustrophobia and something that is spooky. I haven't read it yet just because I had all these other books to read, but it just sounds interesting and it literally always shows up. People always recommend it, so I want to see what it's about. I think it's on Kindle Unlimited, so I might get it at some point just because it's available to me, but that is something to keep on your radar if that sounds like it's interesting to you as well. So those are all the books that I have for now. I love ocean horror, so I'm sure maybe I'll do this next year if I find more, or just kind of like let you know in shorts if I find more. But I really like this genre. I also have a bunch of other genres. I like found footage, creature features. Horror is not a genre that I've been reading a lot this year, but I still like it, and I probably will read more closer to fall. So let me know if you want me to make compilations of other books. I enjoyed doing this. I liked going through my shelves, and now I kind of want to reread a couple of these books, so I might pivot and reread them at some point this summer. Otherwise, thank you for being here. Please like, comment, subscribe if you have not. It really helps me out. I'm still a relatively new channel. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Bye.